A very good morning to you all. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Ayo Makine.
Welcome to Sunrise Daily today.
It's so glad to hear you and have you there, especially because we know that at the end of the day you will also contribute to this program. But you know, one of the things that's been giving quite a good number of people some concern is this whole NIN registration thing. And rightly so. I mean, you have two numbers, three numbers. One of them is private, one of them is public. Only one of them is attached to your BVN. So you need to find a way to link the other one to, you know, your national identity number so it doesn't get blocked within good time. And needless to say, there have been concerns. One of the concerns, of course, is COVID-19 and the fact that a number of people they just don't want any stories. So they throng, look at this, this is one of those examples. They throng the registration centers just so that they can do the needful. As you can see, quite a good number of them are not wearing masks. Now, this is certainly what you would call a super spreader.
Wow.
And this is just one center. It's Lagos, Abuja, whichever center in Nigeria you see, these are the things that is there. Look at this, in Lagos. This one is in Lagos. And I don't even know if it's any different in Abuja. So if the situation is any different in Abuja, and I look at it, no, hardly is anyone wearing masks at the way they ought to wear the masks. This is a super spreader, and whether we like it or not, if we do not give this one attention, there is really
now
something.
Look at Abuja.
This is Abuja, you know. And I think it's also the reason why, you know, NIMSI has come up with what they now call a booking system. So rather than for people to throng the offices, they have certain, you know, ways in which they do this to ensure that people don't just throng the places they send us anywhere. You may want to find out online what this booking system of NIMSI is so that you do not just go throng the entire place like that. I think it is very, very concerning that this has to happen this way. Hopefully, we will get desired results, but that question still remains. One of the issues that has also risen is that mail you read, I think it was last week, where that woman said, I have a problem. I have ported from one network to the other. With my number, I had the NIN. Okay, and that's the one that I registered with. So I'm supposed to now link it with, you know, I have a NIN. I'm supposed to link it with my BVN. And next thing you know, the network service provider says, when you ported, we deleted. We didn't have it. Okay, so what happens? Let me go to the network I ported to. No, you have to start from ground zero. What?
But you know, sometimes, I mean, you know, at that time, I didn't know when it changed because I didn't port. You know, because, look, they thought that if you ported, you could go back to your network.
Which one?
Whichever one you ported from.
Okay, so you can
and so
go
that
back
was the
there.
impression a lot of people had.
Yeah.
And so if they say they deleted when they ported, well, what's the intention? I thought it was to, okay, well, if you're here, well, in the meantime, so was there any guarantee that whichever one people ported, they had no intention of coming back? It was supposed to provide that flexibility.
Absolutely.
So if people ported, doesn't it defeat the purpose if they delete you permanently? It means you're not welcome back here. There's no way you left us.
You know, it's just, you know, anyway, that's just one issue that, you know, one has to contend with about this whole, you know, network service provider thing. Because, see, anyway, I don't even know. You haven't said anything.
Yeah, because the swim swap too, you know, people did complain about the messages they were getting as a result of some of these things. But the networks are saying, look, at the moment, there's nothing we're going to do about that one until the NCC complete their registration. So you will have those challenges. So they were saying, look, the ball is not in our court. It's in that of the NCC. So you'd have thought that, you know, before, if NCC, completing their audit SIM registration. So they're doing all of those. So that has not been completed. Because you'd have thought that the ministry, they all would have worked together, seeing that all of these things are completed. So people will have no reason not to complete the process when they start. But there you go. That's a loophole. And this was what they were initially telling you to go and do in 2 weeks. where we told them, look, how are you going to do this in 2 weeks?
Well,
We
I-
don't all know this country anymore.
Well, talking about knowing this country, I think one thing was clear. There was going to be an extension. But, you know, the hoopla was necessary to catch people's attention to say, you know what, we need to get this done. And the earlier we do it,
Well,
the
it's
better.
not about them just getting it done. It's about they doing their part. So you don't need to. Why must we go through hassles to get simple things done when
Well-
they could have? That's why they're there. Think out a solution to make it life easier for everybody else. After all, they came to you and told you we'll do certain things for you. That's why you put them there.
Absolutely.
Employ them to do
Yeah.
that for you. So those are part of the reasons.
You
And
know-
don't forget, pardon me, now that they're talking about, some states are saying, look, we may shut down in January. So what's going to happen to registration at that point? People will not be able to do it. If they have this kind of movement now, and you see that they've not been able to register, so you then imagine what will happen if maybe stricter COVID protocols in whichever states are put in place. Won't it make it a lot more difficult for people? So these are challenges.
I think there are some things government could still do. There is I know that there is an agency of government at work to unify all data in Nigeria. Now,
Here we go again.
yeah, wait now, Chamberlain. Now, the most delicate thing about this NIN registration is the biometrics. Fingerprints, your face, and all those things. You can't send your biometrics via email. We know that. Okay. So, but when I signed up for a driver license, I gave my biometrics. And I put a phone number in there. Okay. Isn't it talking about simplifying the process, isn't that something that could give me some ease?
Because
you know?
now you can't use that document, that license, or that whatever it is now.
Unless I have a name attached to it. So I'm just wondering, that's one. When I gave my details to merge, when you gave me BVN, I automatically had a NIN, right? But I didn't give my biometrics with the NIN. That's to my bank. That's okay. Now you need me to give my biometrics with NIN. Fine. How do we simplify that?
Well, look, now that they're talking about getting all this thing, I wonder who will come and tell us we don't have the database to distribute certain social security facility, or we cannot provide social security because you don't have the data. So if everybody has NIN, why won't you get palliatives, for instance? If if everybody, well, if everybody has got NIN, so if you have the data of everybody else, isn't it going to be a lot easier to plan and reach out to the people?
Statisticians will tell you it's not that simple. You have your NIN, all right? Okay, fine.
Everybody
Do you
must have
know?
it.
Yes. Do you know how easy is it to get to certain people's homes?
Well, if they have the NIN, that's their problem. Let them go and figure it out. That's why they're there. It's not my headache or your headache. You say, let them sort it out.
Well,
if you want me to
you're absolutely
queue up and
correct.
get my NIN, I will do it. But you fulfill your end of the bargain as well. It's a contract.
You're correct.
So
I'm
they
not
need
going
to
to
do
argue
it.
with you.
That's why they're there in the first place.
Well, yes, you're very
Yes.
correct, and I think government has its job cut out for it,
Yeah.
to ensure that these things. It's not just another exercise; it is a functional exercise that is going towards a goal. Why must I have a NIN? People need to understand that. You have told us if we don't have the NIN, we will block your phone numbers. I hear you. But why is it important? I need to have ownership of the process. So it's not just because I'm threatened. It's because I find a need to register.
It's just like saying, pay your tax. And after paying the tax, I'm sorry, I couldn't fix the road because I couldn't do A, B, C, D, and E.
Exactly.
Excuse me? Or somebody filters or pilfers the taxpayers' funds. You think in other climes they just watch you do that while people go through hard times, harrowing times, and pay the tax? You know what happens in other climes. Now, certain things are paid to you, the taxpayer, having identified and recognized all of those. But let's not just keep waxing lyrical and just see what happens. It's give and take. That's just the way it is.
Absolutely, you're correct.
So let's take a look at the dailies now and see how they're reflecting what is going on. Take a look at Nigerian Tribune. That's the first one we've got here today. COVID-19 running riot. Yeah, so you wonder, what do they mean? Well, look at the host of riders that they've got there. 16 out of every 100 tests are positive PTF. Okay, 16 out of 100.
Wow.
You beat that.
That seems
So
to
what?
have
This is
been-
higher than previously.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
well,
think-
second wave is higher than previously. Well, that's the theory now everywhere. The second wave is deadlier. Second wave is more
But you know,
terrible.
it's the
second
same.
wave is
Same scientists.
second
have-
wave is all sorts.
If you listen to the Lagos State Commissioner for Health, he says, you know, it's not that it's any deadlier or more dangerous or anything. No, but I think it's just our negligence. Well, I'm not a scientist, but if we take what he has said to be anything, I think it's our negligence playing its role.
But you know, some people on the lighter note did say, look, whatever it is that they used, those who who caught it and eventually got out of it, they use certain things. And they let us know what they use so that we'll locally be on standby and strengthen, boost our immunity and not just fall prey to some of these. And who knows, we may develop some sort of herd immunity. Who knows? But anyway, look at the other riders. CAN urges compliance with National Directive on Crossover Service. Ondo CAN adamant. Oshu government makes U-turn. RCCG cancels crossover service nationwide. Oyo bans street carnivals. Says 90 cases recorded in 2 weeks. 2 more doctors die in Abuja. Extreme concern as UK records 53,135 new cases in 24 hours. Germany records over 10,000 deaths in December. 32 teachers die from virus in less than a week in South Africa. So, sadly, that is what you find here today. So, sad. That's what you see. We'll take a look at what's above this lead story here. Now, remember all the hoopla about this one. I didn't call for coup. Kuka. Kuka spoke our minds. Nothing must happen to him. Ekwa. So, but you know, sometimes when some of these narratives make the rounds, you just wonder what people hear, how they hear what they hear, the interpretation they give to what they hear, and those kind of things. But people must understand that, look, all right, for instance, some people think that if everybody seems to be saying something, nobody else must have a dissenting view. And so if you have a dissenting view, they've got to crucify you. Forgetting wait a minute, I thought it's a democracy. Ideas have got to contend. I mean, everybody saying something doesn't, preclude any other person from having an opinion.
Doesn't mean I shouldn't think differently.
We need critical thinking in this country.
Well,
deep critical thinking. To get us out of where we are.
Common sense is not common. So.
Wow. Well, just in case you're wondering, WhatsApp to stop working on millions of phones January 1. Yeah, you may want to see that. Well, that's Tribune this morning.
The Guardian newspaper is also interested in that hoopla you talked about. Kuka denounces coup allegation, lampoons critics. Muslim coalition others condemn attacks on bishop. Muslim professionals say cleric's sermon timely, call for good leadership. The bishop simply spoke the truth to Buhari, it declares. Nigeria will be great if it has 3 persons like Kuka. Muslim group flays marginalization of the Igbo. And Sokapo chides Arewa youths for seeking Kuka's arrest. All of these continues on page 2 of the paper this morning. National response to COVID-19 facing challenges, that's according to the PTF. What are these challenges? The details are on page 2. The details continue on page 2 of the paper this morning. Right under the nameplate, NCDC announces 397 fresh COVID-19 infections and 10 deaths. This got me a little yesterday. So talk about 10 people dying, 10 deaths being recorded in one day. I was literally shocked, and confirming, going with what you said the other time about 116 out of every 100 cases is confirmed. 16 out of 100 tests is confirmed. well, that is really something. We're still, grateful that we do not have so many deaths. And but as the president of the NMA said, let's not wait until people start dropping dead before we do the needful, play our own parts. Senate rejects payment of 969 million naira for Defense Ministry's contract. Find that story on page 4 of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Well, take a look at Vanguard next. Governor Makinde raises alarm. Bandits from Mali coming to Nigeria through Saki border.
Shaki?
Shaki border?
Yes.
What does it sound like? Is it that edible one? They sound alike.
Chamberlain,
Okay.
it's Shaki.
Oh,
Okay? Thank you.
How do you call that edible one?
Shaki.
How do you spell it?
Same spelling.
So there you go. It's breakfast this morning, so it's a breakfast show. So come on, what's wrong? If your mind wanders that way, just bring it back and business as usual, Well, look at the rises now. Meets Okyogun royal fathers, urges Shaki residents to be vigilant, says if they gain entrance to operate, they'll stay. But look, on a serious note, if this is the case, and he has to raise the alarm, you'll imagine that, well, security agencies or intelligence community would have picked this up, or should have picked this up. So if they picked it up, he raising the alarm will suggest that nothing or not enough is being done, because he's raising huge concern, because certain activities that's why it's an alarm.
Chamberlain, I go back to my noise. Border communities.
Noise.
Yes, it's noise, right?
But not an alarm.
Border communities. What conversations are we having with them? If the people in Shaki knew this, they raised the alarm to the point that it got to the governor in faraway Ibadan, then you can be sure that it's not only in Shaki that this is happening. So what kind of conversations are we having with them to ensure that when they come, the Nigerians on the Nigerian side can repel them and say no? So what kind of security network? When we talked about this thing the other time, remember, I think it was you that came up with, look, isn't that why we are looking at community policing? The community policing system would have been able to pick up on that and send the necessary information. And then let's imagine for once that these information really do go out. Intelligence information goes out. To whom does it go? To whom is it actionable? Immigration is supposed to be at the border. Customs is supposed to be at the border.
Yeah.
And certain other, agencies of government are supposed to be there. If, let's say that they can't all man all of the borders, this is why we need the communities to be able to play their part and ensure that we're not as vulnerable as we're making ourselves look right now.
And when you speak about border communities, what about neighboring countries? Because if this is in West Africa, Mali and then you ask yourself, look, if you look at the map of West Africa, they need to go through, could it be through Benin Republic? That's direct border.
Cameroon, Niger, you talked about Benin Republic now, Chad, Burkina Faso, all those countries. That is why when the border was declared open by the president, there was jubilation in the border communities. Why? You heard the DG of LCCI tell us cross-border activities are going on. Cross-border trade is going on all over the place right there.
This would suggest that not enough or nothing is being done.
So
now, if not enough is being done, ECOWAS, I think ECOWAS headquarters is in Nigeria. And so all of these concerns, if he's raising them, if they're coming in, doesn't mean we're looking the other way to allow this to happen?
It goes back to the border. Let us just engage our people. Let's engage our people to make them own the process, because clearly, government can't do it alone.
What about Amotekun?
Well, yeah.
Are they going to do
community
something?
policing? Amotekun.
What? Are they going to engage them? Look, when you think about security, and you need to secure
Honestly.
yourself or protect yourself, all sorts of things come through your mind. Especially if you have your back against the wall. At that time, you don't want to be in that kind of situation. So you can't judge anyone in certain
What
ways.
you have just
So-
said now only underscores something that security operatives tell us, which is that security is everybody's business. So if security is everybody's business, then make it my business. Engage us.
Well, they also have some sort of some story about. Oh no! Before I go to this one at the bottom straight, there's another part of what the bishop said. I didn't call for coup. I spoke based on evidence. That's coup. So there's more here. Now this one at the bottom strip. COVID-19. January will be tough. FG confiscates passports of 100 test defaulters. FCT threatens to shut markets, malls. Cooperates with government on crossover night service. Can NMA attributes second wave to poor adherence to guidelines. Well, as much as they put up all of these threats and try and see how people can cooperate, which won't be a bad thing, they should equally not forget to emphasize the economics of all of these things, because I think that will weigh heavily in the minds of people. Don't forget, you can take a look at what's on the back page as well. They've got Vanguard Sports there. But that is Vanguard this morning.
Daily Trust newspaper leads with this one. 56-year-old Kaduna's only textile company sacks 300 staff. And the response, we're only downsizing, UNTL. No cotton for factory because of banditry. That's according to the union. Stop smuggling, patronize local industries, says RMO. Who that is, the story is on page 5 of the paper this morning. Of course, the images you see there are concerning the story that's led. 15 nabbed over terrorism in Lagos. Wow. 15 in Lagos over terrorism. Well, the story is on page 6. Find the details right there on the front page. Well, beg your pardon, on page 6 of the paper this morning. COVID-19 killed 4 doctors, infected 476 medical workers. That's according to the FCTA. The story is on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper today.
We'll take a look at News Direct next. Stop funding food importation. Nasima, AFAN, backs Buhari's directive to CBN. Insists we must eat what we produce. Well, that's what you see there. But a little bit of human angle here. My creditors are on my neck. 59-year-old man who lost 38 million naira worth of goods to NSAS protest tells panel.
Well, it's just the Daily Trust, the Daily Independent, beg your pardon. Customers resort to POS amid disappointing bank ATMs. That's what you find there and leading the page, and then on the front page as well. Nigerians fed up with Buhari, APC want us back in 2023. Guess who?
Who's that?
PDP.
Oh.
Well, it's politics, so. That's the Daily Independent today.
It's normal. Well, there you go. That is it as well. We'll look at some of the dailies here this morning. We will be back in a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Well, education is in the front burner this morning. We continue our focus on some of the sectors to see where are we, what are we doing at the moment, how far or close are we to some of these lofty objectives where we have them. We have 2 gentlemen joining us today. Dr. Sunday Audu is an associate professor of Department of Political Science and Public Admin, Babcock University, Ogun State. We also do have alongside him Dr. James Okoroma, who is an educationist and a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Dr. Okoroma. Well, we know education, as important as it is, I mean, we've seen, do we need any telling of how important that sector is at the moment? But then, from what you've seen, how we're going about some of these things, I mean, yes, ASU strike was big and still is in terms of how long students had to wait, what they've been grappling with over the years. We've got UBEC, we've got different strategies, so how we're trying to position ourselves educationally. You certainly know about these policies. So from what you've seen, how we're approaching these policies at the moment, what do you think?
Well, my brother, education is central to development. And if you want to define a country, if you want to assess a country, one of the first steps you have to take is to look at its education sector and its education policies. In the area of education, we haven't done well. Over the years, funding has been on a steady decline. Education, primarily, if I may start from this premise, education aims at developing the human person. There are three domains of learning: the cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. You have to develop a rounded personality, all aspects of the human person, and prepare that person for the challenges of development. In Nigeria, we have not done well. If you look at funding, UNESCO recommends 26%. For any nation to develop, it must set aside 26% of its annual budget for education. Over the years, there have been funding gaps. We have continued to reduce the funds available for the education sector. If you go to our schools today, there are no facilities, infrastructure, decay, poor motivation of lecturers, even the act of learning as a result of funding, as a result of poor policies of governments over the years. I know that this government has done some, recommendable things to get its education back on the front burner, but these things have not really worked. If you look at the budget, this year's budget, you will see that only 5.6% of the 3.08 trillion budget is devoted to education. I do not think that with poor funding, poor attention to education, poor motivation for university lecturers, poor infrastructure development in our universities and schools, I do not think that we are making serious progress in the area of education. Then you also look at the COVID-19 pandemic, which has dealt a very serious blow to education. Government can't fund education, is very clear. Today, you have over 50 million Nigerian children who have been forced to stay at home as a result of forced closure of schools nationwide. Already, we have between 12 and 13 million children who are out of the formal school system, and we are grappling with that. And you look at our population, the pressure on government to spend as a result of young people, more people demanding education, you see that funding has to be increased to enable the education sector move on. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Audu, I mean, you were in this sector. Do you remember the Chinese proverb which says, if you're planning for a year, sow rice. If you're planning for a decade, plant trees. But if you're planning for a lifetime, educate people. Being in the education sector, I mean, people enroll year on year. You could get the impression that, well, lots of people are getting education. Will that be a true representation of where we are if the country has that mindset? Or what do you think about, are we making progress or not?
Well, thank you very much. Now, borrowing a leaf from the previous speaker, you can see with the disturbing statistics we have of about 50 million children being out of school in Nigeria, and our inability to meet with the minimum benchmark set for educational budget. I'm not sure in Nigeria we've hit 11 or even 12% at any given time. Vis-a-vis the population of the country, it may seem like people are in school, but in the real sense of the word, not many people have access to education, and I may add to quality education. The quantity of schools should not be mistaken or be compared to the quality one finds in those schools. So it may seem that many people are going to school, but the question is the quality of the education they get in those educational institutions. Looking at the primary educational level, the secondary level, the private schools have really come into play to help at that level, both primary and secondary. Then at the tertiary level, you see private players also coming in. But given all in all, one may look at the quantity and say there are schools around, but the quality, and until we make this distinction, we will be reeling out statistics, figures of achievements, enrollments, but the real quality is not there. And so educating people for a lifetime or preparing for a lifetime actually has a connection, a very strong connection with the quality of education that people receive. And as citizens, what we have still leaves a very big gap, and the government must step up her act, beginning with budgetary allocation, adequate one. And once the citizenry is educated, most of the challenges we have in the country will be reduced, because the education will prepare the head, the heart, and the hand. And once the hand can walk, which is the psychomotor aspect, the heart is there, which is the affective, and the head, which is the cognitive. You see people applying their skills, whatever they have learned, to sustain their lives, to take care of themselves, with the government providing the enabling environment. So let's look at the quantity of schools we have, but let's look closer at the quality we find in those educational institutions.
Well, Dr. Audu, you may want to confirm those figures when you said that 50 million children are out of school. The official figures say it's about between 13 and 14 million, so maybe you want to confirm whether or not that's the exact thing you're talking about here.
In addition to that, I think the Minister of Education, while it was going through screening, I think in 2019, the Senate did say that 16 million children, he said the figure now stands at 16 million, and he said that was based on the census. So that was from the minister. Okay. So those UNESCO figures, sometimes you look for official quotes from here, but I don't think it's 50.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about
it. Again, you may want to confirm that, Dr. Audu, but one of the things that gets to me in all of these conversations that we are having about education, especially, you know, from you being that you, as my colleague said, you operate in the system. Part of the policy, Nigeria's national policy on education, talks about functional education. And in the light of the fact that we hear employers say Nigerian graduates are unemployable because the certificates are there, but the applicability is neither here nor there. So do you want to speak to that? How come we have graduates who are, according to employers, unemployable?
Okay. Now, the like I mentioned earlier, now that about the figures, the correction is duly noted. Like I mentioned earlier, we must have at the back of our minds the number of schools, the quantity put side by side with the quality of education we receive. It has been on the discussion, has been on about the curriculum we have, what we inherited, which we are not bold enough to really tackle head on. At the tertiary level, for example, universities should be given the leverage to package their programs to reflect the realities of the times. When you have a curriculum that is about 30, 40 years old, there are some things that have changed, really. There are basic fundamentals that remain, but there are other dynamics involved. So when you run a curriculum that is 30, 40 years old, in these times, definitely you are bound to find gaps. So the functionality of our degrees, even though we have certificates, is put to test and to question in most cases. That there is a disconnect between what we learned in class, which is mainly theoretical, that may not be necessarily applied to present day realities. So for our certificates to be relevant, for the graduates to be connected to the market, the needs of the market, the needs of the public must be considered. Could it be that there is need to go back to our curriculum? I think recently the NUC is taking a bold step towards that, giving a leverage that the minimum benchmark in the academic provision of universities, the university should carry a larger portion of it by presenting and packaging things according to their needs. And so when we do that, we see our graduates coming out, they are employable. Now, it's true that in our various universities, the NUC has asked that entrepreneurship be included, but even at that, except in a few cases and examples, some of the universities, both private and a few public ones, you still see the graduates coming out with a basically theoretical knowledge with little ability to put it to practice, to the point that organizations that employ, they would need to induct, take the graduates for further training, 6 months, 9 months, as it may require, so they can have them work in the various relevant industries. So I think it has to do with the curriculum. The educationists will continue to debate on that. We need to rejig the curriculum to reflect the present realities.
Well, Dr. Okoroma, I would revert to the question my colleague asked you the other time about Nigeria's national policy on education. I'm asking that specifically because, I mean, if we are to look at how we have fared in terms of education in Nigeria this year, clearly we haven't really, can we even say we went to school this year, given that we were in locked down for such a long time? So going back to the issue now, looking forward to the year 2021, review this year, okay, and looking forward to 2021. What are the things that we should be looking at? For instance, one of the main issues that we did not move forward in education as much as we ought to have this year was because, one, we didn't see the pandemic coming, and as a result, two, the technology that we could have fallen back on, we didn't have infrastructure with which to, continue it so that the students do not lose so many months at home doing next to nothing. So if you were to assess our performance in education as a country from that perspective, what would you have loved to see, and what should we do to step it up? I know you've talked about money. Let's leave that aside. Let's look at the function of what are the things that we're supposed to do.
First, let me make further clarifications on the figures I reeled out when I commenced. I said between 12 and 13 million children are out of the formal school system. Then those who have been forced to stay at home as a result of the forced closure of schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic are about 50 million. In 2020, we haven't done well, not primarily because of poor funding and poor policies, but the COVID-19 pandemic worsened the situation in our educational system because nothing was actually achieved. Between February 2020 and now, schools have been closed. Schools in the private sector, private proprietors have been badly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, look at education. Historically, the colonial masters initiated an educational policy aimed at producing clerks for the colonial bureaucracy. Now, society is moving forward. Technology is taking over, science and technology. Nations are advancing. So we have to also move the curriculum to a level where it can produce graduates or products who can face the challenges of the future. With the digital economy, nations are going digital. Education should also go digital. We must produce citizens who can face challenges in the job market. What we need to do is to deploy technology. I know that the Federal Ministry of Education, in collaboration with UNICEF, are doing something in that direction, like creating online and offline platforms to ensure that children study, whether in school or out of school. We have to expedite action, do more in that area, deploy technology, and ensure that online education is enhanced. We need to fund education properly. The 5.6% which we have given to education in this year's budget, you have 3.08 trillion. And only 5%, which is about 742.5 billion.
Expatiate something that you just mentioned.
It's not enough.
Just one moment, Dr. Koroma. Something that you said earlier, now when you said we need to deploy technology, if you can give us a little more, if you can give us some more specifics about what exactly you're talking about. We have quite a good a number of tiers of government. We operate a 6-3-3-4 system. We have primary, we have junior secondary, senior secondary, we have tertiary institution. Then we have adult education. So if you're talking about deploying technology, can you give us a few more specifics about that?
What I mean by deploying technology is giving education, using technology to offer education to the people. Since physical interaction between teachers and learners is no longer easy as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we need to deploy technology, create online platforms. The Federal Ministry of Education is doing this, but it's not enough. The issue is, or the question is, how many Nigerians in the rural areas, in our 704 local government areas, how many of them in the rural areas can afford Android phones? So we have to also look at this. As we deploy technology, we also have to find a way to reach the unreached, reach those who are in the rural areas. If you deploy technology, students can actually sit at home and learn, without having physical interaction with their teachers. That is very, very important. That is what I mean by deploying technology. Having online, correspondence. Even in the past, many people earn their degrees by correspondence. We can actually do the same, since physical interaction is no longer as possible as it used to be because of COVID-19. So we need to deploy technology. We need to look at power. It's a multifaceted thing.
Okay, well, Dr. Koroma, just one moment. Let me take that question up. Well, yes, let me take that question up with Dr. Audu, especially about deploying technology. Something a number of people have also said is that teaching people physically and teaching people online, they are completely different skill sets. So in terms of skill sets for the people, the instructors who are going to be teaching people online, first of all, you want to speak to that. How possible is it? How workable is it from your own experience as a tutor? And how do we deploy it if you say that's a way to go in the event of the challenges that we're having right now?
Okay, let me first and foremost say that COVID-19 should not be the only motivation for us to deploy digital technology to. I think it's simply what brought for that. For example, we have the National Open University, which is about the largest university that adopts technology, or let's say distance learning, with about 580,000 students enrolled across West Africa. Now, universities need to really embrace this, and the government must support it. In our own experience as a private university, what happens is training, several trainings. Now, the willpower the political will rather to do it is very, very important. So as a tutor, we had to undergo training on how to handle the various platforms. For example, you have Edmodo, you have Google Meet, and several others. Of course, we are on Zoom right now. These are technologies or platforms that can be deployed for the educational sector. So training is the key word. People are trained and exposed to those skills. But I must just say something about what my colleague just said. The technology, the platform, the backbone. You see, in Nigeria, access is a problem. People in the rural area hardly have a very, very reliable network. And something has been thrown into the playground also, this linking of the national identification number with our SIMs. We are very thankful to the government for extending the deadline. But this singular act would have cut off so many Nigerians. So I do believe things will be worked out with policy considerations to see how this project can be carried through. But the point is that so many people need their mobile phones and lines to connect to their educational institutions for those that offer them. So in the course of the lockdown, coming from my experience, we ran the second semester to conclusion, administered exams. The first semester also came, there was a phased resumption of students while at the same time online classes were going on. And that was done successfully. Even the graduation ceremony was done virtually, and it was very successful. So I think it's the political will of the government to ensure, jointly working what the UNICEF is doing with the Federal Ministry of Education to ensure that the backbone, that is the technology needed to run these programs is there, so that those at the local government level will have access. The 774 local governments, can we boast to say they are all connected? They are all connected. So it becomes a problem. So you train people to have the skills on how to do this, then let there be good access. And that cannot be provided by the people or the schools. That is where the government comes in to provide these facilities. Then after training teachers, the students at every level from the primary to tertiary level can also be trained to have the skills. And good enough, the young people of nowadays, they are technology savvy. You hardly teach them how to use these gadgets. They are able to use them. So I think when the government collaborates with the educational institutions by providing the enabling platform, the enabling environment, that is access to the internet, these technologies are able to be deployed so that quality education will be delivered to the people. Although there is a caveat, there is still need for contact no matter what. Those in the clinical sciences, you cannot do that virtually. Those in engineering that would need hands-on experience, you cannot do that virtually. But to a great extent, the application of these technologies to really help, and education will reach as many as possible, not only because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but because we are moving towards classrooms without walls. And that is the direction we'll be looking at, education of the future.
What kind of consideration is your institution, if you can talk about that, given to those in the classes in the realm of engineering and the likes, clinical sciences that you spoke about, in order to get them on board as well?
Okay, if you allow me to mention, in our institution, that is Babcock University, we don't have engineering, but we have others, a med lab, the medical school, those in the technology-related courses, computer engineering, and the rest of them. So arrangements are made for them to come on site, even the exams, because you take lectures online, but it's very important to be on site to take the final exams. So what we do in the case of COVID-19 is to have a phased resumption arrangement whereby they can take their lectures online, but when it comes to the practical aspects, they come on site here in the school. All measures are put in place to ensure their safety. That is through testing. Already, the university has a molecular lab licensed by and accredited by the NCDC to carry out tests. So adequate measures are put in place. Now, this may not be applicable to every other institution. This is where the government really needs, these things can work. These things can work. So in our university, the practical courses, the clinical, people come on site and a phased resumption agreement is made so they can have hands-on experience. Like I said, these things cannot just be done virtually. Probably one day we do that as technology gives us the opportunity. But this is the current practice in my institution.
We'll go to break, but we'll return and get our concluding thoughts from both of you in a moment. Do stay with us.
Thanks for staying with us. Dr. Okoroma, one thing also that one would wonder how we can go about in our country is to stem the tide of brain drain. It would seem like at every opportunity, the next thing anyone wants to do is to, as they say, check out. What can we do to stem that tide, especially in the education sector?
It is poor motivation that leads to brain drain. It is not only in the education sector. A similar thing is also happening in the health sector. If you motivate teachers, I have university lecturers who are my colleagues. I have professors who teach, who give lectures from their cars. Some of them do not have offices. When visitation panels are coming for accreditation, the university management will force non-academic staff to vacate their offices for professors to occupy those offices so that the visitation panels will see them in the offices. So we need to motivate lecturers, teachers at all levels, not just at the university level, from primary school to tertiary level. We need to motivate teachers. If you don't motivate teachers, the next thing is to leave the country, not just our teachers, doctors. Provide facilities in our universities, the required infrastructure. Look at their salaries. How much does the professor earn? Look at all the arguments over IPPIS. If you exclude CBN, NNPC, and FIRS from IPPIS, why can't you exclude the lecturers? Give them their earned allowances. Motivate them enough because they're putting in a lot. My brother, unless we contribute to the advancement of education, the rest of the world will not consider us as their equals. Compare what lecturers earn abroad and what they earn here. Compare the facilities available in universities abroad with what you have here. Our laboratories are not equipped. There is no security, which is another dimension to the problems we have in the education sector. So if you motivate them properly, provide the facilities they need, allow them to enjoy their autonomy, university academic autonomy, they will stay. Give them the required, the tools they need to perform. If you don't do that, brain drain will continue, not just in the education sector, in the health sector, and in other sectors of the economy.
Take that same question to Dr. Audu. Beside that of the motivation, any other thing you can adduce to reasons for brain drain in the country?
Well, I think just like he said, basically, there are economic considerations. Now, motivation, that is basically the driving force. Education, economic considerations. Now, of course, there are, where you work, you must find satisfaction. There must be self-actualization, and the tools must be provided. Now, when you mix the absence of those things and you mix that with economic considerations, then you see that people have no choice. And surprisingly, except for the medical doctors or nurses that leave the shores of this country, from the academia, most of those who leave, I do not have statistics to support that, but from personal contacts and interactions, most of those who leave end up doing other jobs other than academic engagement. So you see, it's a loss of valuable human capital from the economy here. Now you go. There are universities in the U.S. that whose professors are substantially Nigerian, hospitals whose medical personnel are substantially Nigerian. You go to South Africa, so not only the US or Europe, even in other parts of Africa, you go to Botswana, Zambia, and South Africa and other countries. So you see that the work environment is not conducive, but mix that with economic considerations. How do you imagine a medical doctor who spent so much to go through medical school, or a lawyer or an engineer who spends so much, an architect, now basically finding nothing to do within the country here? So he or she moves out to find other things to do. So besides the work environment, which should be motivating the economic needs, even where there is a conducive work environment, you see that the pay is not commensurate to the effort. But you see, generally, these things should be viewed holistically. The entire country needs to consider and reconsider so many other things. Why is it that when our students, say graduates, go out there, they excel at the postgraduate levels, they win awards and so forth? Now, the same students coming from a supposedly weak educational system, if we put in more, this comment is not to support the level we are in right now, but it's rather to encourage us that, the Hausa have saying that when God blesses you with good looks, enhance that by taking a good bath and trimming yourself very well. If our students can do so well, I think if we look inwards, we can as well be one of the greatest countries in the world. So a holistic view should be made of the entire Nigerian system economically, and then in the educational sector, which we are discussing right now, so that we can have valuable human capital remaining within the country to develop the economy. Because what we have, the brain drain, is actually human capital flight. So just like we have capital flight when multinationals take money out of these countries, same with brains that are going out. So these things should be given a holistic view so we can have a strong and virile country. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Audu, is that the reason? Because, many people believe, and you probably do as well, that universities are supposed to be the pots of ideas for any nation. They are where the nation is supposed to harvest ideas that will help national development in specific areas. So how significant is what you're talking about now in not getting those ideas that should have helped us to expedite national development the way we ought to have, according to what the policy on education says, and what the vision of the Ministry of Education is?
Okay, let me quickly say, if I if I understood you very well, I think there is a disconnect between the town and the gown. The educational institutions, my colleague just said, he spoke about the curriculum bequeathed us by the colonialists. Education, just training the head for people to be clerks, storekeepers, and moving files and documents around. There is a disconnect between industry needs and what happens in the educational institutions. Just let me give an example on the African continent here, not even outside. I visited Stellenbosch University in Cape Town, and what I learned there, you see, the universities in South Africa, their research is tailored towards the needs of the government, and for every paper published, every research carried out, every PhD defended, the findings, the recommendations are made available to the government, and the government uses it. In fact, to the point that in the transportation sector, train engines were bought and they were sent to the universities, to the engineering department, to assess the capacity of those train engines, how long they are going to run, what loads they can carry, and how far before they will be, their full depreciation will occur. So these things they do, and they make recommendations to the government, and based on that, policy works with academic recommendations. In Nigeria, there is a great disconnect. The ivory tower is doing its thing, and the government is doing its thing. I think until we have a connection you see, by now we should come up with a vaccine, at least try to come up with a vaccine for COVID-19. There are so many societal ills that we can work and collaborate with the government. So if you allow me to say, there is a great disconnect. There may be some areas of collaboration, but I think the government needs to look closer into the universities, because therein lies most of the solutions to the problems and challenges we have. And so it's a mutually beneficial relationship. When the government supports the ivory tower produces the kind of findings, research that will galvanize the government into action. And the government must be honest enough to adopt these recommendations. And in the long run, it will help to deepen the research endeavor in our universities. Mostly the research done is to publish and earn promotions. But when the government shows interest in what happens in the universities, research will go deeper, and the recommendations will inform how government formulates her policies. And then we begin to grow from that point. I think that is it.
Wait a minute. Does that then mean that the universities can change their focus to benefit society without government necessarily showing that interest?
Well, yeah. Now, it goes back to the regulatory authorities. Like I mentioned earlier, the NUC is working towards that positively by giving a free hand to the universities to mark for academic programs of the universities. And the universities can be creative, looking at their areas of need to develop. I believe the universities can work, but you see, the universities operate within a system, within a jurisdiction, and the government generally offers regulation. There is little the universities can do, even though there is much they can do. And from what we see now, with more encouragement and more support, the universities will do more. But they are doing well, but there is a limit to what they can do once the government is not supportive of their efforts.
Dr. Okoroma, going forward, if you can give us maybe one or two bullet points of what we can do, if you agree with Dr. Audu, about bridging that gap between the town and the gown.
Yeah, as he rightly pointed out, there is no synergy between the economy and the universities. The university, the gown and the town must collaborate for national development. There's no point producing graduates who are not employable. As we speak, there are job opportunities in the economy that we still can't find people who can handle them. So if the universities and the drivers in the economy can come together and with proper motivation from government creating the enabling environment, the regulatory agencies coming in to play their rules, the universities coming in, what we're talking about is national development. And all these partners must come together for us to make progress. There's no point producing people who cannot fit into the economy. So there has to be a synergy, there has to be connection between these partners. Then we also have to refocus the curriculum. As I stated earlier, the curriculum we had in the past was to produce clerks for the colonial bureaucracy. Now we're talking about a digital world, a digital economy. How do we refocus the curriculum to ensure that those we produce can actually fit into our plans for national development? We also need to produce people who can be international citizens, fit in. There are even jobs internationally that our people cannot compete for because of the poor training we give them. So that is very important. We need to refocus the curriculum. We need to create a synergy between the town and the gown so that we can produce people who can fit into the economy and help in developing our country. We need to motivate the trainers. We need to ensure that the facilities for training our children are available and are comparable with what is obtainable in other parts of the world. It is very discouraging when you go abroad, even in the West African sub-region, you see their system. Look at Ghana. Many Nigerians are now sending their children to even West African countries that are not as endowed as Nigeria to train their children. When we have the resources, we have everything. All we need is the political will, and then the proper synergy for those who are in the system, educational system, and those who are in the economy to come together. Then
okay, we hear you. We need to anchor at that point.
That
Mr. James Okoroma, an educationist, as well as Dr. Sunday Audu, an associate professor of political science and public admin, Babcock University. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. We will be back in a moment. Stay with us. Well, look, when you say, because we see this every day. We get responses from people every day when you go out to have a thing or two with them. And so, you know, the kind of narrative you get to hear from people raises a lot of concern concerning the kind of challenge that the authorities will face with the messaging. Maybe that's where message design experts will come in, design those messages to get to the people, vis-a-vis what they will do with the vaccines, I guess. So let's see if we've got Mr. Ohabonwa back. Thanks again for joining us today. I was talking about the second wave of COVID-19 and how the kind of messages we're getting from government. So from your perspective, how would you describe this message? Is it clear-cut? We all know what to do, how to approach it. Are we largely on the same page with this one?
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I believe that if there's one thing that the government has done well in Nigeria regarding the management of COVID-19 is consistency of message. I think that the government has been on point from beginning to now, and they've taken it as seriously as we would expect a responsible government to do. The challenge is, are people responding appropriately, accordingly? There seems to be continuous level of disbelief.
Okay, well, I think that is going to be an important part of all of those things, that continuous level of disbelief which he just spoke about. And that's part of the concern that the authorities do have in terms of what they do, because as consistent as he says those messages are, what kind of results are they getting? Okay, go ahead.
Refusal to continuous level for people to accept the reality of COVID-19. That's the challenge I think that we have. As for being consistent in message, they are doing well. And as for second wave being reality, this all over the world, it is coming very strongly, perhaps much more infectious, more lethal than it was the first phase. But Nigerians, I really don't know what else that needs to be done to convince them that they need to take precautions to save their lives and also to save the lives of those who are near and dear to them. So I think that the government is on point and they are perhaps putting the right emphasis. It's better to overemphasize this than to do less.
All right, now, okay, we'll be back in just a moment. Just stay with us. Well, Mr. Ohabonwa, there was a point you made about government's consistency of messaging or communication, and then an increasing level of disbelief. Clearly, two opposites. It means that, look, the messaging, as consistent as it may be, as you've said, clearly not having the desired results that it should. Why, if you could tell us, why do you think that there is that increasing level of disbelief among the people?
Well, I think the thing is, it's just because God, I mean, permit me to say God has been very gracious to us, that we are not having the same level of infectivity. We're not having the same of morbidity as many nations are. Because if we're having as many people infected and many people die, as we've seen in the US every day, I mean, more than 3,000 people are dying in the US every day, and it's been consistent over several weeks. And if that were to happen in Nigeria, certainly no.
If it's frozen on us again. Okay, but while we'll keep at that, I just want to raise some concerns, just observations as well from that submission of his, because look, Manchester says, well, could it be because they're not seeing so many deaths, those affected, as it were, but which will put it to him as well when we get him back, even in those countries, in the States, for instance, where you've seen that high mortality or death rate, you have cities there who kicked against this lockdown, say, no, we don't want this lockdown. They went to the beaches. They said, no, they went to the clubs. So there's this fatigue about some of those things. So how do you then reconcile that?
It's a tough call, definitely, as we often say here. Government has their work cut out for them. One of the things that I'm sure we'll be able to get Mr. Hwabwa to respond to or to speak to is the fact that state governments have a tremendous role to play. You know, we say this often. The NCDC, the PTF COVID-19, their job is pretty much just administrative and coordination. The states are the ones that have the responsibility of talking to the people who live within their domains to ensure that they do the needful.
Yeah, Mr. Hwabwa, good to have you back. But I was going to ask you, in those countries, in the States, for instance, where you say there's a high level of death, but we've also seen in the same country, different states there, where people just said, no, we're tired of this lockdown. We don't want any of this anymore. So they're asking questions. Some don't even believe it. So there's still dissent, a huge number of dissent in those states. So how then can we then say that maybe because we're not seeing as much death? Could that really be the case?
Well, it is, because right now I'm in Abia State, and I know that the government of Abia State has issued several notices, put some regulations, some even much more superior to what NCDC has said, or what the PTF is saying. Yet, I went to an event yesterday. I was the only person wearing a mask. I looked like a very odd fellow in the crowd. I don't think we can force people, except if we decide to make a law and then to be sincere, we are not the best in keeping to laws. Look, we have traffic laws, we have all kinds of laws, and yet people are breaking them with impunity. But this ones relate to healthcare. I believe, if you ask me, government is doing its level best, both at local and national levels and state levels. It's left for the citizens themselves and also for communities to put pressure on themselves, because that's probably maybe much more impactful if the community leadership, the development associations in different towns and villages can come out and enforce this. But the point is that I was asking them in Irish, where I come from, since this COVID, has anybody died? They say nobody has died. What about people who are sick? They say they've not died. There was just a time when a few people had malaria and everybody got well. That could be what was the closest to having more people had malaria, and that was all. So it just the fact that God is gracious to us and people are just not believing. Communities are at best. Federal government can do its bit. States, the communities, if they are seeing the result, but people want to believe what they see. That's the way. If you tell them Jesus is coming again, they say until we see him. If you tell them there's kingdom and hell, they say until we see them. That's the way people behave, and there's a minimum to what we can do, or we can encourage those who have care for.
Yeah, pardon me to bring in this. It appears as though we may be losing sight of the narrative that, because it's associated with some of what you just said. You know, part of the narrative which we equally got here was many of them kept on saying, look, what we have seen, because it's one thing to be consistent with your message, it's another thing to have the right message to the right people, or else it will be what we call waste exposure. I think they do that in advertising a lot. So maybe we'll get him back because it's frozen on us again. It's that the feedback from those out there was, look, if they thought those in the plane, and then they said, it is those up there that this is associated with. So we haven't seen cases of those who were in the buses, regular people like us, because that was a narrative that they saw from the media at the time. The reportage was tilted.
This is speaking to that technology deployment that we talked about earlier. You know, the challenge that we have to encounter, you know, in deploying technology. By the way, there is such a thing as telemedicine as well. So if we're talking about telemedicine, we're definitely talking about not just internet. We're talking about broadband internet. We're talking about nothing less than 10 megabytes per second. So I don't know.
And in some countries, internet is a right. Yeah, it is a right, a fundamental, a human right of the people. In some other countries, it's part of the world.
How we deploy? Okay, I think we have him back now.
Mr. Abu, I think do we have him
It's
back?
not here. It's not.
Okay, you know, when we talk about you know, this whole thing about, you know, technology and all of that, deploying technology into medicine, one of the things, the questions that I ask is, where are we even going to consider starting? Technology is like blood. It runs in the system. And when we talk about the system, we're not talking about just one sector of the Nigerian economy. We're talking about every tiny detail of the economy, every tiny detail of our lives and livelihoods. That's what technology is. It's like blood. So if we want to embrace it, we can't just embrace it for the head or for the arm or for the leg. It has to be holistic.
Well, look, don't forget that theory. You know, I don't know why it always comes to my mind whenever you talk about technology. Technological determinism theory. You know how it is. You have laggards who won't easily grab any technology you bring to them. Unless you associate some sort of benefit to them, then they can grab it. So
we just have to
national. It's a communication theory, so it's there.
Chamberlain, we only need to incentivize it. We here, you are aware that in Japan or China, there are old people in their 60s, 70s who have embraced technology. How did we market it to them? So, well, Mr. Abuwa, one of the things that's come to me about this whole conversation we're having about engagement on COVID-19 is, this is not the first time we're dealing with health emergencies. Over the years, we have dealt with cholera, we've dealt with measles, we've dealt with polio, we've dealt with malaria, we've dealt with all kinds. We've dealt with Ebola, thank you. And somehow or the other, we were able to market it to the people for them to own the process. Is there something we haven't done right in terms of the messaging so people can embrace it and take ownership as they ought to?
Hello?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, yes.
Yeah. I'm saying that we have had to deal with health emergencies for years in our country.
Yes, I heard you. The thing is this, the thing is that it is just the logical framework of human beings. They see malaria patients every day around them. They see people with polio. They see people with chickenpox. They see people with all cholera dying and stooling all day. One family shouting and yelling. Everybody in the community hears it. But this is not the same. This is not the same. You can't believe Arichku is the headquarters of Arichku local government, a whole local government. I was making inquiries. Has any family lost anybody? In fact, has anybody reported sick as having COVID since January or February? And they told me none. So no matter the kind of message you give them, they will just think it is not real, or it is for you guys who live in the towns, who are committing sin, or who are cheating us, who are eating our money. You are the ones who are God is punishing you. But for those of us out here who are in poverty and penury, nobody, so we're okay, God is taking care of us. That's the sort of thing that is going on. So I don't think we can blame the messengers or the medium of passing the message. I do know that not only have individuals, those of us who live in towns, we've sent messages, we've sent palliatives, we've done house to house, we send people, mobilize people to go house to speak to people, take care of the old people. They wear the mask for 1 week, 2 weeks, and they have not seen anybody sick. So they just throw it away and wonder what your problem is. So I don't know, we should be breaking our head on this. I personally think, that's my own feeling, that in terms of communication, we seem to have done well. I don't know what else. From some villages will take gong and be going beating gongs, just the way villages pass information around the town. And yet people just don't keep a damn at all. They talk, they mock at you if they see you wearing mask or talking to them. But I and my family, my wife and I, were here. We are wearing a mask whether you are happy with us or not. So everybody who cares for himself, where the day, I just pray it doesn't happen, but the day we do see a sudden change of mortality or morbidity, then people may change their behavior. People like to see what they want to do. This is my thinking, and now that we are going to talk about vaccine, you know how much effort.
Just a quick one before we get to that. Were you? It appears as though you expected that there will be cases in Arochukwu because you were sending palliatives right there. So you must have been disappointed, perhaps, when you got there, you didn't see any. But when they told you that there was none, was it genuinely that there was none, or you thought that they were covering or hiding something?
They're hiding nothing. In these communities, you can't hide anything. Where are they hiding it from? Hiding it from who? They're not hiding anything. And I go around. Since I came around, I've been to most of the villages in my town. I'm involved in so many community efforts and events. So I have not heard. I have not been told this person died. This person, is in the hospital. My house is close to the general hospital here, and I've talked to the doctors. If people have come, like I said, there was a time there was some malaria that looks seasonal. More people have malaria than usual, and it could just be some sign of it. But that was it, and they got their normal malaria treatment, and they felt well. So they couldn't say it was COVID. For example, we don't have a COVID center here. Nobody's testing anything here, because unless if you are sick, then they move you from 2 hours or 3 hours to 1 year. And who wants to go to 1 year to go and test? So there may be a few hidden ones. I cannot say that with certainty, but it's not at a level that is visible and for people to notice. I think that's the way I can explain it.
Well, now about the vaccine. What do pharmacists think? What do you think? Because, I mean, given some of the scenarios that you've just painted, there are those who just think, well, not too sure about this vaccine. What is your impression about it?
Again, well, like I said, it is historical. You know the battle that we have fought to get even our children to take vaccines, polio vaccines, meningitis vaccines, and all kinds of vaccines all over the country. It's usually a very hot matter that comes with all kinds of interpretations and innuendos. But, again, with sustained effort with the primary health care team, the National Program on Immunization, and partnership from multilateral and, bilateral agencies, we were able to overcome. And today, the uptake of those vaccines, childhood vaccines, have increased. I believe the same will happen here. At first, there may be some, because of the same lack of belief and skepticism we have seen. But many of the enlightened people will take the vaccines, because the vaccines have been proven to be effective globally. And Nigeria was part of the trials, I believe, in the global trials mandated, mediated by WHO. And so when the vaccines become available, people who really care for their lives, especially the elderly and those who are very exposed, the frontline people, healthcare professionals, people like you in the media who are always traveling from one place to another, we should take the vaccines, because all these theories and conspiracies don't make meaning to me, because they are just myths, which we believe with these myths over several centuries. This will happen. The world will end yesterday. The world will end tomorrow. This one and none of them has happened. The day it will happen won't it will happen, because they say it will happen without our notice. So why bring all those fear to people? My thinking is, let's go through the scientific process, admit the vaccines, distribute them effectively. My only worry is, do we have the technology, the facility to keep these vaccines in the cold temperature they are supposed to stay? That's our worry as pharmacists, because the 2 to 8 degrees we have to put the existing vaccines we use here is difficult to assure in the presence of no electricity all over the country, and you have to depend on generator. I ran my generator all through the night today, and if the light came when it came, it was as if you couldn't even light one bulb. I'm talking about in Aruchukwu. I don't know what it is in Lagos. I know it would be better in Lagos, but that's the way it is. So when you have this kind, and the people in Aruchukwu will need the vaccine, how do we get it to them? What kind of infrastructure do we have? That's the challenge.
One thing, Mr. Ohwamwa, but the bigger challenge perhaps for me would be what you mentioned earlier, which is, how do we persuade the people who do not believe in a disease to take vaccines for a disease they do not believe in?
Well, that is going to be the tough part of the work. It's the tougher than asking them to wear face mask or do social. As tough as they are, easier than asking them to do vaccine. I mean, it's like asking somebody to take a medicine when it's not sick. Nobody likes to take medicines when they're not sick. But again, that is where the skillful ability of communities and health workers will come to play. Like I said, for the elite, even in Aruchukwu where I am here, the elite will take it. Those who travel around and who are worried about their health and not will take it because they want to live good lives and they don't want to die. But those, the average, or, permit me to say, I mean, looking at the level of poverty in Nigeria, quite high level, over 50% poverty. Those ones are more concerned with surviving today than wondering about tomorrow, and so they just treat it with disdain.
Yeah, it's also among the elites that a good number of people have said that this communication about whether or not COVID-19 is real or it's as debilitating as it's been touted or is as dangerous as people are making it look. It is among these elites also that we have people who are saying, no, it's not that, it's not as serious, it's all a hoopla and all of that. So if we have some elites saying that, and we have some elites saying, no, let's take it as seriously as it has been announced, where then lies the fate of the common man, as they say?
Well, I agree with you. That's where there is confusion. But the saving grace in all this is that we have a consistent message from government. That is what excites me. I've never had government say things from different sides of their mouth. From beginning, they set up the PTF and gave it to a very humble servant, Boss Mustafa, to lead, and he's leading a pack that's committed to this. That's my reading. I mean, I've had my quarrels with them of the late adoption of so many things, but I think that they have done well in keeping the message consistent. The state governments have also taken suit, and they have done the best. Some worked hard to establish PCR molecular laboratories in their state capitals, working with NCDC. I personally think that in terms of passing information, we've done fairly well. I mean, everybody can improve. There are areas we needed improvement. For example, I mean, today, like I said, if anybody has COVID in Aruchukwu, how does he get tested? Since we can't use rapid tests, everybody must use molecular tests that is just few and far, and he needs to travel on 3 hours on bad roads to go to Umuahia to get a testing center. So this is the area that we haven't done well. We haven't liberalized testing. We have not done much testing. But my point is, in terms of communicating, the mitigating precautionary measures, we seem to be doing well. All we need to do is, when the vaccines are ready, as you said, your own problem is not the the infrastructure of storing them. That's my own problem, really, because how do I get vaccines across to the to the country around this nation? 704 local government without electricity, without good road network. How do you get vaccines to them? Especially the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. Even the except when we wait for that AstraZeneca vaccine, which seems to be the one you can store at the normal room temperature or the normal refrigeration we get from our fridges. That is the issue. I haven't had anybody tell me how we're going to move these things, what kind of systems we put in place to provide the cooling effect, not minus 70, minus 70 degrees centigrade. I don't know how we're going to get that. So that is where I think we should put effort. When the vaccines are ready,
that is
those who don't want to take it we can't beat them. But there
but
number of people now who want.
Let me put this in. You know, I think that is part of the reason why the president of the Senate was telling the committee, look, he was suggesting that they put on hold the rush, if I could use the word, to go and acquire the vaccine, and then I think they said they'll spend over $400 billion at $8 per person, you know, for 70% of Nigerians. And then he says, put that on hold, get the infrastructure in place so that when you then get the vaccines, you can have and then distribute. But that's on the one hand. But as we wind down, what do you tell people who say, look, we've seen people who are leaders, some of them who say they contracted COVID, they were healed. They took certain things to boost their immunity, and then they're okay. And several other people are doing some of those things, and then they're equally getting better. So why will they need to take vaccine? What do you tell those kind of people?
What I need to tell them is that I have a friend, a medical doctor, who in Abuja, who had COVID the first time and was healed. He got the second COVID and he died this month. A medical doctor in practice for many years, a medical doctor. So that's what I can tell them, that COVID that we haven't established the immunity level that the COVID is giving, and it depends on the size of the inoculation that the COVID, the kind of immunity it will give. It hasn't been established. Then other comorbidities, other underlying disease conditions that can worsen your case and make you more susceptible to the lethal and damaging effect. Secondly, I have always seen people who say they were healed or cured, but they have had long-term effects, and we will not know what the long-term effect, because it has carrying of your lungs, carrying of your internal organs, your respiratory organs by COVID. The fever may go, but the healing may not have finished, and you never know what other things that can come long-term. The safest thing for anybody is not to have COVID. You can't gloat that you have it and you are healed, so you can be careless with your life. I believe that is death wish for many people. Go and prevent COVID as much as you can. Some people have tried to prevent it, like this my doctor friend, and yet he caught it. Perhaps in the effort to help other people.
Okay, then.
Secondly, take the vaccines when it comes. Take it. It's safe, generally safe. So take it, and you lose nothing.
Well, even though there are several reviews now talking about different warnings about who can, the side effects, where has it been tested, how long. So there are always concerns that people need to hear them speak about before they jump at it. But we do thank you for your time this morning. Sam Ohaboma, President, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. Well, let's get right and then take a look at some of the messages that you have sent to us. And today we've got that of Musa Muhammad. Go ahead.
Well, Musa Muhammad starts with this COVID-19 and SIM registration. It says, I'm amazed at the FG on the management of COVID-19. On one hand, the federal government is saying, go and link NIN to SIM. And with the same mouth, the federal government is saying, January will be tough. I just know the citizens are less their priority. Oh dear.
Well, Olalekan says, I think it will be difficult for us to achieve the quality we desire in education if the government is the major funder of universities. We should be looking to universities generating at least 50% of their needed funds to align with institutions across the world.
Still on education, Dada Olowo says it is asking too much from this system for the foreseeable future to do anything about digitizing education when there are some people still in the corridors of power unwilling to let go.
Well, Bashir Bala is talking about Nigeria's educational system, saying the amount they are budgeting for Nigeria's educational system is not enough for it to meet the standards required.
And Olushola Duyeleme, still on education, says until governments at all levels start to see education as service to the nation rather than doing the people a kind of good, the story will remain the same. It is a shame that none of our ivory towers emerged among the first 25 in Africa.
Okay, maybe the ones for the vaccines haven't dropped yet, but I can imagine what... Okay, well, we'll just wait until they send it.
Certainly.
See what you say. Well, thank you all for your messages. We do appreciate them. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Please be safe.